The cheers of thousands of graduates echoed across the Columbia University lawn as I thrust my diploma into Liam's hands. I ruined myself for you, Liam. Every bad decision, every night I drank to forget, it was all because I've been in love with you since freshman year. My voice cracked on a last word, and before the shock could fully register on his face, I spun around and melted into the sea of black gowns and laughing families, heart hammering so hard I thought it might crack my ribs. I didn't look back. Not when I heard him shout my name, not when I ducked behind the alumni tent, not when I sprinted across Broadway with my robe flapping like broken wings. New York swallowed me whole. The honking taxis, the steam rising from subway grates, the indifferent crowds that had always felt like home until this moment. I had planned the escape for weeks, suitcase already stashed in a locker at Penn Station. By the time the ceremony ended, I was on a train to Chicago, staring at my reflection in the window while the city I loved disappeared behind me. The truth had finally clawed its way out after 4 years of swallowing it down. Liam and I had been inseparable since the first week of orientation, two freshmen from opposite coasts thrown together in a cramped dorm. He was the golden boy from California, broad-shouldered, quick with a laugh, the kind of guy everyone wanted to be around. I was the quiet kid from a small town in Ohio, sketching in notebooks and pretending my heart didn't race every time he clapped me on the shoulder. I told myself it was just admiration. Then admiration turned into longing, and longing turned into something that ate me alive. I started skipping classes to avoid seeing him flirt with girls in the dining hall. I drank too much at parties, so I wouldn't feel the jealousy when he brought someone home. I turned down internships because they would have taken me away from him, then hated myself for the choices that nearly cost me my degree. By senior year, I was a shell, thin, exhausted, barely sleeping. But I smiled every time he asked if I was okay. Just stressed about finals, I'd say, and he believed me because that's what best friends do. Now the secret was out, and I was gone. I landed in Chicago at midnight, checked into a cheap motel near Union Station, and cried until my eyes burned. The next morning, I found a studio apartment in Logan Square for $800 a month, paid cash from the savings I'd hoarded by living on ramen and coffee. I told myself this was the reset I needed. No more pretending. No more destroying myself in silence. But silence has its own weight. The first week, I barely left the apartment. I walked the neighborhood at dusk, past breweries and murals, wondering if Liam had already moved on. Part of me hoped he had. The other part, the part that still loved him, hoped he hadn't. The flashbacks came in waves, sharper than any hangover I'd ever survived. I remember the night sophomore year when Liam dragged me to a party in Brooklyn. The music was too loud, the room too hot, but he kept pulling me onto the dance floor, laughing when I stepped on his toes. "You're terrible at this, Ethan," he shouted over the bass, but I wouldn't dance with anyone else. For one reckless second, I almost told him. Then a girl in a red dress cut in, and I spent the rest of the night on the fire escape pretending the city lights didn't blur through tears. College was supposed to be freedom. For Liam it was. For me it became a cage I built myself. I watched him date 3 different women in 3 semesters, each one beautiful and kind, each one making me feel smaller. I buried the pain in cheap whiskey and late-night coding sessions for extra credit. My GPA dipped so low my advisor called me in. "You're throwing away your future, Ethan." I nodded, smiled, and went straight to the bar. My family back in Ohio didn't help. Mom suspected something. Mothers always do. But Dad made it clear that real men didn't cry over boys. The last time I visited for Thanksgiving junior year, he'd asked if I had a girlfriend yet. When I said no, he clapped me on the back too hard and said, "Don't wait too long, son. Life's short." I left early the next morning and never told him why my hands shook the whole drive back to New York. Liam never pushed. That was the worst part. He'd knock on my door at 2 a.m. with pizza when I was spiraling, sit on my bed, and talk about everything except the dark circles under my eyes. "You're my rock, man," he'd say. "Don't know what I'd do without you." Each time those words carved another piece out of me. In Chicago, the days blurred. I landed a junior graphic design job at a small marketing firm through a Craigslist ad. The pay was decent, the work mind-numbing, exactly what I needed. I bought a second-hand laptop and started sketching again. Cityscapes, anonymous faces, anything but Liam's smile. At night, I walked along the river, listening to the L train rumble overhead, telling myself I had done the right thing. Then Sarah called. She had been our mutual friend since freshman orientation, the only person who'd guessed my secret years ago. Ethan, what the hell? Liam's losing it. He showed up at my apartment yesterday, asking if I knew where you were. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. I gripped the phone until my knuckles whitened. Tell him I'm fine. Tell him to forget me. She sighed the way only Sarah could. You know he won't. I hung up and stared at the ceiling for hours. The confession had been selfish. The disappearance was supposed to be kind. Now both felt like mistakes. Weeks turned into months. I threw myself into routines. Gym at dawn, work until dark, cheap Thai takeout in front of old sitcoms. The city helped. Chicago didn't know my history. No one here remembered the Ethan who used to laugh too loud at Liam's stupid jokes, or the Ethan who once cried in a library bathroom after Liam got his first serious girlfriend. Here I could be new, but the past refused to stay buried. One rainy Tuesday, I opened my email and found a message from my academic advisor back at Columbia. Your transcript is complete, but I wanted to check in. You left so suddenly. I deleted it without replying. Later that night, Sarah texted a screenshot. Liam standing outside our old dorm, staring at the door like it might open. He's asking everyone, she wrote. Even called your mom. My stomach dropped. Mom had left 3 voicemails I hadn't returned. I could picture her in the kitchen, twisting a dish towel, wondering why her only son had vanished after graduation. Dad probably thought I'd finally grown up and moved on. The irony tasted bitter. Flashbacks kept ambushing me. The winter break junior year, when Liam invited me home to California. His parents had a big house in San Diego with an ocean view. His mom hugged me like I was family. His dad grilled steaks and asked about my future plans. I slept on the couch and listened to Liam breathe in the next room, wondering what it would feel like to wake up beside him. On the last night, he came downstairs at 3 a.m. for water and found me awake. We sat on the deck wrapped in blankets, talking about nothing and everything until the sky turned pink. You're the best friend I've ever had, he said quietly. I almost broke then. Instead, I smiled and said same. Back in Chicago, I started therapy. The counselor was a soft-spoken woman named Dr. Rivera who didn't flinch when I finally admitted out loud. I'm gay, and I fell in love with my straight best friend. She asked gentle questions about self-worth and boundaries. For the first time, I let myself feel the anger, at myself for the years wasted, at the world for making love feel like a crime. Sarah kept updating me. Liam had quit the entry-level finance job he hated and was sleeping on friends' couches. He'd started drinking too, she said. The guilt twisted like a knife. I had wanted him to wake up, not fall apart. Spring arrived in Chicago with sudden warmth and blooming lilacs along my street. I bought a bicycle and started riding the lakefront trail every weekend, wind whipping my face, trying to outrun the what-ifs. Work gave me a small promotion. Nothing glamorous, but it meant health insurance and a reason to shower before noon. I even went on a coffee date with a guy from the firm's accounting department. His name was Marcus, kind eyes, gentle laugh. We talked about movies and bad bosses. When he leaned in for a good night kiss, I froze, mumbled an apology, and walked home alone. Some doors, it seemed, stayed locked no matter how far you ran. Sarah's calls grew more urgent. He's in therapy too, Ethan. He told me he can't stop thinking about what you said. He keeps replaying every moment you two ever had. I think he's starting to understand. I sat on my tiny balcony with a beer and stared at the alley below. Understanding wasn't the same as acceptance. And acceptance wasn't the same as love. One night, I opened my sketchbook and drew him. Not the polished graduation version, but the messy college Liam in sweatpants, hair sticking up, grinning over cold pizza at 2 a.m. The drawing hurt so much I almost tore it up. Instead, I tucked it between pages of an old textbook and tried to sleep. My mom finally reached me through Sarah. She's worried sick, Sarah said. Just call her. So I did. The conversation was short and painful. Mom cried. Dad stayed silent on the other extension. When I told them I was gay, the line went so quiet I thought we'd been disconnected. Mom finally whispered, "We love you, baby. We just want you home." Dad cleared his throat and said, We'll figure it out. It wasn't perfect, but it was more than I'd expected. For the first time in months, the knot in my chest loosened a fraction. Still, Chicago felt temporary. Every corner held echoes I couldn't silence. I started looking at jobs in smaller cities, maybe Denver, maybe Portland. Anywhere that didn't feel like running. The call came on a humid July evening. Sarah's voice shook. "Ethan, he's on his way to Chicago. He found your address through the alumni database." I tried to stop him, but he's different now. He came out to his parents last month. They didn't take it well. He lost his mind for a minute. Then he just started driving. I stood frozen in my kitchen, phone pressed to my ear, heart slamming against my ribs. How long? 2 days, maybe less. I spent the next 48 hours cleaning an apartment that didn't need cleaning. I rehearsed speeches, deleted them, rehearsed again. When the knock finally came at 10 p.m. on a Thursday, I opened the door, and there he was, thinner, eyes shadowed, but still Liam. The same crooked smile, the same way he rubbed the back of his neck when nervous. "Hi," he said. I stepped aside. He walked in, looked around at the sparse furniture, the half-finished sketches on the table. "Nice place. It's temporary." We sat on opposite ends of the couch like strangers. He spoke first. "I spent months looking for you. At first I was angry, then scared. Then I started remembering things, the way you always had my back, the way you looked at me when you thought I wasn't watching. I realized I'd been blind because I was terrified." I listened without interrupting. He told me about the fight with his father, the nights he drove around New York hoping to spot me, the therapy sessions where he finally admitted he'd been falling in love with me for years but didn't have the words. "When you disappeared, it felt like the sun went out," he said quietly. I had to figure out why. Tears burned my eyes. I thought leaving was the kindest thing I could do. It almost broke me, but also woke me up. We talked until the sky lightened. No promises, no grand declarations, just truth, raw and messy and long overdue. The weeks that followed weren't a fairy tale. We argued. We cried. We walked the lakefront trail in silence some days and talked until our voices gave out on others. Liam stayed in Chicago, found a job at a nonprofit, started rebuilding piece by piece. I kept my apartment, kept my therapy, kept learning how to love without destroying myself in the process. We never rushed back into anything. Some nights we sat on my balcony watching the city lights and simply existed in the same space. Other nights we drove to Indiana, dunes, just to feel small against the water. Slowly the old friendship returned, deeper now, honest in ways we'd never managed before. One crisp October evening, we stood on the pier, wind tugging at our jackets. Liam turned to me and said, "I don't know what the future looks like, Ethan, but I know I don't want to live it without you in it, however that looks." I took his hand, warm and steady, and for the first time in years the weight I'd carried since freshman orientation finally lifted. We still had work to do, family to reconcile with, friends to explain things to, a world that wouldn't always cheer for us. But we had time, and we had each other in whatever form that took. True or false, sometimes disappearing from the life of the person you love is the only way to make them truly see you.